Whoever clarity my whole life. Page 67, identification. This is a very common regulation that we use in many of the other regulated occupations we deal with here, identification. And this specific one lists 3 valid types, and I will be candid with you, there are others in the other regulated occupations we have, and I limited it to this because of the residency issue for Colorado. We have to sell to Colorado patients and those kind of things. And so therefore I limited it to a driver's license, operator, chauffeur, similar type driver's license issued by any state. They all have to be valid with a photo, identification card. I see I've got a type or a spacing error there, and a military ID card. Am I missing some others commonly used?
Passport?
Pardon me?
Passport.
Well, and that's one of the issues. If you live in Colorado, should you have one of these 3 forms, and would you commonly use a passport?
It might not be an issue commonly, but say you misplaced your driver's license and you need medicine. If you've misplaced your driver's license and you need medicine, can you then use your passport?
Because it will have an address on it. Passport doesn't have an address.
Pardon me?
Passports do not have addresses, generally, unless they're entered by the passport
They do
holder.
not have, that's correct.
However, passports are acceptable from the cdphe side with a company of documents.
And they're acceptable on the other regulated occupations here, as long as they're valid, and they obviously have a photo. Cheryl?
Are we assuming that the patients have already received their registration card, which means that the health department has already validated their residency? So a passport could be adequate as far as a form of ID.
Yeah, this would be the second form of ID. They still need to provide the patient registration.
The card, which has already, we've proven residency at that point, and the passport, I think should be adequate.
Okay. Brian?
Yeah, I had a non-passport related comment. I'm just, to be clear, the scope here is just licensees selling to patients?
Correct.
Okay, this is not licensees selling to other licensees?
Correct.
Okay. And then I'm just wondering if this is sort of in congruence with the Constitution, which allows for legal sales after 35 days with purchase only, as per your ruling yesterday. So I just want to make sure, because as we know, the health department has been very negligent in turning out actual licenses. So I would say the majority of patients actually cannot meet this because,
You know, the very first rate we put language, notwithstanding the provisions of Section 14 of Article 8 in the state constitution, I'm happy to add that language here. That's a good catch.
Because the word in Amendment 20 is board's functional equivalent. So maybe that word, those words.
It is its functional equivalent, but that's only for law enforcement purposes, I believe.
It's 3A.
Yeah. I think we're better off just notwithstanding the provisions of section. Sorry.
So you're on that map, now adding that phrase, whatever that one is, in there, then a person's paperwork that they have, even if they haven't received and it's past the 35 days, that is sufficient.
Yeah, and keep in mind, we've got legislation pending to deal with the 35-day issue, so it's going to be a non-issue when we get there.
Okay.
Jim?
The rationale for not recording the Colorado driver's license are used that when they get the registry card, they prove their residency.
I believe that's the case, and you might be able to do that to prove lawful presence and that kind of thing to get a patient registry card.
Yes.
Do you know off the top of your head what forms of ID are acceptable there?
There's a laundry list. I can share that with the group, but I don't know it off the top.
Would you send it to me?
Sure.
So I'm sorry, Matt, what happens in the meantime when they don't have their license, and this might have been covered in that first meeting, when they've applied and they don't have their license, what is going to be required to be shown to a center to obtain marijuana.
And that's the 35-day position statement that we just issued. Constitution sets forth 30 and 5 days. It says that CDPHE has 30 days to do their investigation, 5 days to mail. The HB 1284 just generically refers to that time frame as a 35 days.
Right.
There's nothing in the Constitution or HB 1284 from my standpoint that says that a patient can buy from a center from day 1 to day 35 and have an affirmative defense. The patient has arguably an affirmative defense from the time that they see a doctor, but there's nothing that enables the center to sell at this point, and therein lies the issue. But that's another issue that's going to be resolved before these rules of law, I believe, is going to be addressed legislatively. So the issue then is, can a center sell to a patient from day 1 to day 35? Currently, today, as we stand here today, sit here today, I say if they do, they're at their own peril, meaning if the patient turns out to be a patient and CDPHE doesn't deny them for whatever reason, then I don't have issues with it. If, on the other hand, they tender fraudulent documents or CDPHE denies them for whatever reason, then there's liability on behalf of the center. And so it's really kind of sticky wicket between day 1 and day 35. But again, that's going to be addressed legislatively before we get to this rule.
Okay.
Well, if I may, I wanted to circulate the proposed legislative fix that we have Senator Pat Stedman sponsoring us this next legislative session. So I have a copy of the proposed language, which I'd like to pass around to everybody.
Great, yeah.
For the medical
okay.
marijuana industry groups.
You know, the way this works, he doesn't work for government, so he doesn't have the same limitations that I do. And I'm certainly not offended by, I was in the same meeting he was in. So. That's great.
So,
thanks for doing that.
So is this a non-issue then? I mean, I'll take a look at it. Is this a non-issue or?
Well, it's, I think it's a result of inartful drafting and, kind of borrowing the same flawed language from the Constitution. So what we're doing here is closing up that loophole, and allowing for individuals with the proper proof of mailing and the physician certification, because at the core of it, the physician cert is really the document
Right.
that kind of, sets the stage for your legality, so to speak. So what we're doing here is closing that loophole, allowing individuals with the proper proof of mailing, and that actually will be written into legislation to purchase from day 1.
Which is what my concern might be, is that we rely on that application, which is fine, that's in the Constitution, but does that then affect what exactly can be used in conjunction for identification? Because we presume that the valid registry card is valid, it's been vetted through the system. An application, although we all understand, is pretty much just as good as any type of actual card, has not been vetted. And should we then handle applications and identification separately, or should we, because that would then bring up the passport issue, or some of these less, say, reliable or whatever types of identification. They don't have to be as reliable because we've got that vetted card. But if we don't have a vetted card, we're relying on an application. What do we do?
Yeah, and they're going, the intent of this ID reg, it was the second piece of validating identification or information required for a center. So the center either needed the patient registry card or they needed the paperwork, proof of mailing, along with the second form of ID, and that's really what the intent of this reg was.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have more copies of that, Norton?
I'll be more than happy to email the whole committee.
Please.
after today.
Gotta bring it up for whole class.
So the question that I have though is, in what Matt is saying, if we as an MMC allow somebody in, I put them in my POS and they've got the paperwork but they don't have the card, I will then assume that until, probably 8 months from the time they show me that paperwork, I'm just gonna have to assume that they're legitimate buyers. If they get denied in that 8-month period, I have no way of knowing.
And they can just reapply.
Huh?
And they can just reapply and just live on temporary.
Right, and I have no
Over
way
and over.
of taking them out of my system.
You have different issues once you get beyond day 35, but that's, okay. Any other comments? Real quickly,